All right, we have two parts made. We have the lock body and the lock spring pusher. And you can rotate between those two views right up here. Right up below annotate, there's this little triangle right here. If we go to the lock body, I can see that. If I click on it again and go back to the lock spring pusher, I can. I want to make sure I go back to the model space on the lock spring pusher. So I'm back in the model. I got all my tools up here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble these together. So we're going to go new, and instead of part, we're going to go down this one that says assembly. And I'm going to name this lock. Lock-A or lock-1. Go down from part to assembly and take off the default template check. Name it something you'll remember. And hit OK. Now you're going to come down to MMNS Assembly Design. So that's what we want, MMN Assembly Design. Hit on that and hit OK. Now a new box pops up. I'm going to shrink her down here. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. We got it fitted in the window. Now in the middle, you'll notice it says ASM default instead of like a part. You're in an assembly now. Okay, I can switch back and forth again. I have this lock.asm, and then I got my two parts up here. So let's make sure lock 1 is got the little dot on it. We're going to start there. And to assemble something, we can start putting the parts together on this lock on the computer. We can make sure they fit before we start printing them. So I'm going to come right up here to where it says assemble, and make sure you set your working directory to where your files are, where your part files are. I'm going to click on assemble, and now I can see all my parts in here, and I made some parts before in an assembly before. I want the lock body to be my first part I'm going to put into this assembly. And I'm going to hit lock body, open. And now it throws it in there, and it's purple. And if you look up here where it says status, no constraints. Right now, the computer doesn't know where this thing is in the world. So it has a problem. It doesn't know where anything is. On the very first part, just the first part you do, when you bring in the first part, go over in a white space, right click and hold for a second, and come down here where it says fix constraint on the first part only. So we'll hit fix constraint. Now it says fully constrained here. The computer knows where it is, and now it knows how to work with it. Okay, so make sure it says fully constrained, fix constraint on the first part only, and then hit the green check. All right, so now we want to bring in our number 2 part, our lock spring pusher. So we're going to hit the assemble button again. It brings us back to our working directory, and I want to bring in a lock spring pusher. I need one of those, and it throws it in here. Notice it has no constraints on, and it just kind of fit it in somewhere for us, okay? What we need to do is put some constraints on this, or constraints are just telling the computer where this thing is in relation to the lock body. So if I click on the plane tool right here, datum display filters, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to turn off everything except the axis display. So make sure the axis display still has a check mark by it. The axis display is check marked, everything else is turned off. Otherwise it can get kind of confused. Okay, then we can click in the white space and it goes away. I want to make sure these two surfaces right here, the surface of this lock body and the back of this lock spring pusher, are touching each other. That's going to be my first constraint. So I'm just going to click on the surface of the lock body, and I get this little green cord hanging on, and it says automatic. It's going to make an automatic constraint. So I hold the wheel mouse down once I get it, so I get to the back of my lock spring pusher, and once I see that highlight in green, I'm going to hit it, and it says coincident. That means it's locking them together. You can see the two surfaces are touching right here. It says coincident, and they're touching. You can do a distance offset. You can set that to any distance you want. An angle, you can make them parallel, coincident, and normal. I've never used normal, but I have used the other one. But we want those two to be coincident, locked right together. Okay, it still says partially constrained, so it's still not fully constrained. It just knows that those two surfaces are touching. All right, if you go into the center of this pin, you'll see this little line. This is the center of our circle. And if I click on that little line, I get an automatic, and I get my little green line. And I want to go here to the little line in the middle of this circle on the lock spring pusher. Once I see that little line turn green, I can hit it, and it set it as a distance. So right now, it's 39.97 millimeters away. And what I want to do is change that distance to 0. And you can see it just locked it into that pin. It slid it right over that pin. So now it's locked to that pin. So we got partially constrained. And that's all we want to do right now, because I want to do something here that's kind of cool. I can take this little circle here, and I can actually turn my lock spring pusher. So I can figure out how it's going to work, where it's going to hit this. I got to have enough room for my key to go in there. Things like, sorry about that, my phone rang, had to quit for a second. So I don't want it fully constrained. I want it partially constrained, because I want to be able to move this around. And I can check to see if parts are going to start hitting. When I start putting other parts in here, I can see how they're going to react to each other. And I always do a back arrow to make sure it is back where it originally started. So I can hit the green check, and now I got my lock back with my lock spring pusher on there. And if I want to move that lock spring pusher, I come over here, right click on it, go down to Edit Definition, and you can change that. So now, watch what happens though now. This is why Creo is so powerful of a computer program, really. Okay? I can go back now. That's kind of not how I wanted. I thought it was going to look different, but I want to change that. So I'm going to go back up here and go to my lock spring pusher part. And I want to change these numbers a little bit. I want to change how this thing looks. So I can go back to Sketch 2 because I know that's where my spline tool was. I'll go Edit Definition, Sketch View, zoom out a little bit. Now what I can do when I select these, I can grab these points and I can change how this thing looks just by moving these points. I can change how my lock spring pusher looks because I want it to be a little bit longer. All right, so I change it a little bit and I hit OK. All right, and then I will do a save because I don't want to lose that. Save, hit OK. And now when I go back to my assembly, so let's go back to lock.asm, you can see that foot changed. That lock spring pusher changes automatically on my assembly. So now you can start adding parts and seeing what they're going to do. So that's a good start for you. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me. But now we can start changing things and see how they're going to interact with each other.